Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this Legal Aid New South Wales Law webinar about the Legal Aid New South Wales Family Law Early Intervention Unit and Amica, the online tool for separating couples. My name is Kerry Wright and I work in the Community Legal Education Branch at Legal Aid New South Wales. I'm here today with Ruth Pilkington from Legal Aid New South Wales and Paula Megan from Legal Services Commission of South Australia. Hi Ruth, hi Paula.
Hi Kerry, hi everyone.
Hello there, good morning.
Oh, that's good, we can all hear you. So to begin, we would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of this land. We would also like to pay respect to the elders of this land, both past and present, and extend that respect to other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people attending today or watching the recording. So the purpose of this webinar is to explain two types of help that separating couples or families, as people with family issues, can get: the Early Intervention Unit at Legal Aid New South Wales and Amica, the online tool. So Ruth and Paula, do you want to start by telling our audience about your roles? Do you want to start, Ruth?
Thank you, Kerry. And I too would like to acknowledge that I'm coming to you today from the lands of the Wangal people of the Eora Nation, and to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander colleagues listening today or later. My role is the solicitor in charge of the Family Law Early Intervention Unit, which is a New South Wales based team within Legal Aid New South Wales, and we provide assistance to people about family law, care and protection and family violence issues.
Thank you. And you, Paula?
Yeah, thanks Kerry. Hi everyone, I'm the team leader for Amica. So I'm based in Adelaide and I've got an acknowledgement slide coming up in a minute. So as the team leader, I'm working on developing Amica and letting people know about Amica, because it's a very new kind of service. There hasn't been anything like it in Australia before, so I'm doing lots of sessions like this to let people know about it and answer their questions and help them know, when Amica's safe and suitable to use.
Great, thanks Paula. Okay, so this slide coming up is just an overview of what we'll cover today. So as I said, we'll first of all look at the Family Law Early Intervention Service, and then we'll look at Amica, and we'll also talk a little bit about other online resources you can use and publications you can order for your clients. And of course, we'll answer any questions you have as we go through. So we're first going to look at the Early Intervention Unit with Ruth. So Ruth, do you want to tell us who you help at the Family Law Early Intervention Unit?
Thanks very much, Kerry. Yes, so our team is focused on assisting people with family law problems, particularly those concerning children, where people might have issues with property when they've separated from their former partner, if they've got concerns about the payment of child support, either receiving child support or paying child support, or where unfortunately they've experienced domestic and family violence in their life and they need some advice about those issues. We also provide a lot of assistance to people who've had involvement with the New South Wales Child Protection Organisation, the Department of Communities and Justice, and we assist people with early intervention issues in relation to that department, where the department is concerned, for instance, that children are not being cared for in a way that is appropriate, and there are risk issues in relation to children. We can advise people how they can engage in current care proceedings, and we assist people quite extensively in relation to post-care matters, where they might be seeking more time with children once orders have been made, where they need advice about adoption or guardianship. So our team is focused on providing those early intervention services. I describe our service as being a little bit like the casualty or the emergency department in a health context. People come to us and we do the triage for their matters. We provide them with emergency assistance where that is essential, and then we guide them to the next place that they need to be, to the next legal service that is going to assist them, particularly if they have a current ongoing matter where they need representation. Our service is available to men and women. We also can assist children if they find themselves in a situation where they might also be a parent, or perhaps they're coming out of care. We particularly are focused on reaching vulnerable people, particularly those in rural and remote areas that have difficulty accessing another legal aid service, and those people experiencing family violence, or Aboriginal people and people of culturally and linguistically diverse background.
Thanks, Ruth. So we might do our little poll with our audience just to find out how often people have clients with family law issues. So that poll will come up now, and you can vote using your device. How often do you have clients with family law problems? Very often, weekly, often fortnightly, sometimes monthly, or rarely or never. So we'll let our audience vote and we'll see how we go with that. I'll close that now, and I'll share the results with you both. So you can see there the results have come up. So 36% very often, 29% often or sometimes. So the majority of our audience seem to have clients who do have family law issues, so family law problems. So that's good to know. We've got the right audience with us today. So I'll just hide that and I'll take you onto your next slide, Ruth, which is to tell us the key points about the Early Interventions Unit at Legal Aid New South Wales.
Thanks, Kerry. Yeah, so our service is a New South Wales-based service. So all legal aid commissions around Australia have a focus on their local territory or state. So our service for those people who are outside New South Wales, unfortunately, is not available to people in your state or territory. And our service complements existing family law services provided by Legal Aid New South Wales. Our services are always free and confidential. Even if the person involved in the dispute is being assisted by another part of Legal Aid New South Wales, our service can still assist. That goes to the issue of conflict of interest for lawyers. All lawyers always need to check that they haven't personally assisted the other person involved in the dispute, but it is now possible within Legal Aid New South Wales for us to assist both people involved in a matter, as long as that matter doesn't involve ongoing court action. We can't be representing in court both parents or perhaps the mother and the child, but we can provide what we call a short service to both people involved in that matter. The family court has recently gone through some extensive changes. The Federal Circuit Court and the Family Court have been merged, and so we now have the Federal Circuit Court and Family Court of Australia. And our team is very accustomed to providing services in those locations. We provide what we call duty services in those 4 main registries of the Family Court in New South Wales. At the moment, because of COVID, those services are not provided face-to-face, they're provided over the phone. But because of COVID, many court appearances are currently being conducted over the phone or by Microsoft Teams. So people can still access legal advice from our team if they don't have their own legal representation arranged.
Thanks, Ruth. I was just interested in what you were saying about legal aid representing people, both parties in a matter. That question often comes up in the community because people say, oh, I can't get help from legal aid because they're helping the other party. But people can get a grant of legal, like private lawyers can sometimes be paid by legal aid to help someone in a matter.
Yes, Kerry. Yeah, that's a really good point. So 2 different lawyers within legal aid could assist people initially. 2 people could each have some legal advice, perhaps there could be even a mediation conducted involving 2 different lawyers from legal aid. But if the case proceeds to court and both parents qualify for legal aid because they're of low income and they each have a case that is one that should be assisted by legal aid, in other words, it meets our means and merits test, both could be represented, and Legal Aid New South Wales could pay the fees for both solicitors.
Okay, good, thank you. All right, so how do you help people? This slide coming up now. Thanks, Ruth.
Okay, well, at the moment, everyone needs to call us or contact us via our 1-800 number, 1-800-551-589. Like most 1-800 numbers, that number is only available for someone who's calling within New South Wales. Calls are triaged, and then where urgent, a person is provided with a service that day, which we call our duty service, and that is consistent with the way things would have been if they'd been coming to court, for instance, when court appearances were common. As I said earlier, if we determine that someone's case is particularly urgent, if a child is really at serious risk of harm, it is possible for our team to prepare a court document. Often that would be an application to the family court for an order that the child be recovered into the care of the parent that we're assisting. And that order is one that directs the Australian Federal Police to then liaise with the local police for that child to be recovered to the care of that parent that we're assisting. It is only in very extreme cases where it's appropriate for us to be doing that work, because we don't go through the full assessment as to whether someone qualifies for legal aid because of the urgency of the matter. The other type of case that we might, where we might do court documents, is where there's a risk of the child being taken overseas, perhaps to a country that doesn't have an agreement with Australia about the return of the child, perhaps because there has been a threat that that child might be forced into an underage forced marriage, and we are then able to seek orders to prevent the child from leaving Australia by placing them on the family law watch list. Again, those matters haven't really been so much of an issue over the COVID period because, of course, international travel has been so complicated. But now with borders opening up, that is something that will become more of an issue once again. So in those cases where someone contacts us and their issue is not one where we need to speak to that person that day, we will book people in for a 30-minute appointment, and we'll provide appropriate follow-up where necessary and when the client is particularly vulnerable. So that could involve writing letters on someone's behalf, maybe making representations to the Department of Communities and Justice in relation to that person's situation, perhaps assisting someone to draft a parenting plan or something of that nature.
Okay, thanks, Ruth. And this next slide talks about a little bit more about those types of services that you can offer.
Yes. So yeah, we of course we will advise people and try and help them to use the strengths that they have themselves, their own personal relationships to help resolve the issue that they have. Perhaps it could be that their mother or their aunt or their uncle might be able to assist them by looking after children to resolve an issue, let's say. We also represent people where they're before the Federal Circuit Court and they don't have their own solicitor. That service should be limited to at least to only one court event in most cases. And we do have to take into account people's financial circumstances to some degree when we're providing those services. We also are able to assist people with a discrete area of work. For instance, if we come into contact with someone who has come to the attention of the Department of Communities and Justice and they say to us, I'm addressing all the issues that they've asked me to address, but I need someone to help me advocate in relation to that issue. We're able to do a piece of work called an extended legal assistance, which would amount to 5 hours of work to advocate on that person's behalf. We're also able to assist with mediation, which we call early resolution assistance. And that can involve, for instance, having a telephone mediation. Again, over COVID times, Legal Aid New South Wales has developed a special form of mediation that takes up to 2 hours to resolve disputes, particularly in relation to COVID issues. For instance, if there's a dispute between parents about whether a child should be vaccinated, that's the sort of discrete issue related to COVID that our team might be able to assist with. And finally, we do the sort of thing I'm doing today, which is to speak to community workers about our services and about legal aid more generally.
Yeah. Great, thanks, Ruth. So now we've got an example coming up here of a case study with a 21-year-old single mother, Jan. Do you want to tell us how you helped her?
Yeah, sure. Jan approached us in circumstances where her 11-month-old daughter had gone to stay with the father just for a short time because he was having a family event, and he had quite significant issues. The father had quite significant issues, but Jan was satisfied that when her daughter was going to be with the father, her daughter would be safe because there would be other family members there who could act protectively towards her daughter. He had not spent much time with their child because they'd never lived together, and it really wasn't appropriate for him to be providing regular care for the daughter because, unfortunately, he had perpetuated family violence against Jan and had a long history of drug use and failure to adhere to a mental health treatment plan. So in this case, Jan contacted our duty service and we attempted to negotiate with the father for the return of her daughter. Unfortunately, that was unsuccessful. So we then urgently prepared court documents for the recovery of Jan's daughter, and that was listed urgently at court given the risk issues that were posed by the father. And given that the little girl didn't really know her father at all because she'd hardly spent any time with him, and she would have been feeling very uncertain and probably quite fearful being away from her mum for so long. So we then arranged an ongoing solicitor for Jan to represent her in the proceedings which we'd started with that recovery application. And Jan contacted us after those proceedings had been commenced and let us know that the father actually didn't engage in the court process. So after 6 months, the court made an order that her daughter live with her and that she have the responsibility for making all decisions for her daughter because it seemed that the father really wasn't that interested in being in his daughter's life. So that was an example of how we can assist where a child is really at risk of harm in the other parent's care.
Thanks, Ruth. And I should have said at the start, just to let people know that there is a handout on your control panel with a copy of the presentation that we're using today. So someone's asked a question here, Ruth. This was in the absence of any family law orders. So at the beginning, there weren't any orders in place?
No, there were no orders in place at the outset. But even if there had been orders in place, it may have been appropriate to seek a recovery. But I mean, this type of scenario is relatively common in our team where people have had a child without living with the other parent, and the other parent has been largely absent because of their personal circumstances and challenges in their life. And if that person is wanting to keep a child indefinitely, then the child will be at risk. And so we really need to intervene in this way.
All right, let's have a look at the next study coming up with about a little well, 2 little boys, but there's only one on the screen.
Yeah, so this gives an example of just how much work we might be able to do, particularly for particularly vulnerable people. And this situation involves 2 young Aboriginal boys. We assisted their father to obtain a parenting plan that addressed the safety issues for the boys, and they were able to stay in his care. The father then unfortunately passed away, and the boys were temporarily taken into care. The boy's older sister then approached us as she wanted her 2 younger brothers to come and live with her. Because the older sister was not a party to the children's court proceedings, and for reasons which we could never really quite understand, the Department of Communities and Justice were refusing to consider her as a suitable placement option. We then assisted the older sister to prepare what's called a joinder application. So that was so she would be formally joined to the children's court proceedings, and then the court would have to consider her as a placement option. And then with effective advocacy from our team and also from one of our outreach partners, the sister was successful in having the children placed in her care. So that's a very quick summary of a case that involved a lot of intensive work, and that's the sort of work we're able to do in those cases, particularly involving Aboriginal children, where, of course, there's such a need to ensure that children stay with their family, provided, of course, that they're safe.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks, Ruth. Well, we've got here the phone number for the Early Intervention Unit, 1800 551 589. What happens when people call that number, Ruth?
When someone calls, they'll speak to one of our wonderful admin team members, Kerry, and they will do some triage to determine whether that person should be assisted that day or booked into an appointment. Sometimes people will call and they might be better off assisted by somewhere other than our team. For instance, I know someone called this week and was seeking legal advice because they'd been fined in relation to a COVID-related matter by the police. And that sort of issue is not an issue that our team has particular expertise in. So we arrange for that person to be assisted by another part of Legal Aid New South Wales.
And there's a couple of brochures there about the Early Intervention Unit that people can order for free from the publications section of Legal Aid New South Wales. And also all our brochures are available in PDF, so you can download them if you're mainly working with your clients remotely these days. You can download them and email a copy of our brochure to your clients, and they're available on the publications tab of the Legal Aid New South Wales website. And this slide coming up is just about some other resources. We also have a whole range of brochures around what happens when your relationship ends for both Aboriginal families as well as the general community. And we've got the Best for Kids website, which has a whole range of videos for children, young people and parents around a range of legal issues, and the Family Violence Law Help website, which is a national legal aid project, and a good segue because we're about to talk to Paula about Amica, which is also a national legal aid project. So thanks, Ruth. Is there anything you want to say now before we head over to Paula?
No, thanks very much.
All right. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to bring Paula into the conversation. I'm going to switch over to Paula, and she's going to chat to us all about Amica. You can see the details there where you can find Amica, but Paula will talk more about that. So I'm going to make Paula the presenter, and she's going to take over the presentation for this next part of our webinar.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Kerry. Can you guys see the PowerPoint there?
We can.
Thanks.
Great. Okay, thanks everyone. Thanks, Ruth. So I'll be talking about Amica, which is really addressing the family law needs of a very different group of people than the team that Ruth just described. I'd just like to acknowledge that I'm on the country of the Kaurna people here in Adelaide and pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people that have joined us today or listen later. So today I'm covering some basics about Amica, the documents that Amica produces, the user experience when using Amica, the AI, and some safeguards for making sure it's used safely and suitably, and referrals if people are thinking Amica might be suitable for clients that they're working with. So Amica was launched in 2020 and it is a national project. So it's able to be used in any state in Australia. It's funded by the Federal Attorney General's Department. And the really key factors to keep in mind as we go through are that it's a service for amicable separating couples with reasonably straightforward situations in terms of both their children's matters and their financial matters. So really quite a different set of people. But what we know is about 50,000 people divorce in Australia every year. And a lot of them are not eligible for legal aid, but also can't afford a lawyer. And we know a lot of them are amicable. And so they really are looking for a pathway to help them through their family law matters. Amica received some awards when it was launched, and there's been a lot of community interest. So that really shows, I guess, the need to help people that fall into the group that we're trying to provide a pathway for. So we'll have a look at the documents that Amica produces. So I guess I'd call that the products. So Amica can produce documents for couples to download for parenting matters and for property matters. The parenting agreements look like this. So in a minute, I'll show you the interface that people use to arrive at this document. But just to show you what it looks like, it's very clear, it's laid out nicely. Paragraph A there tells people, anyone that's looking at it, that it's generated by Amica. And then it goes out and sets out the background of the couple's relationship details. And you can see there that this is actually a test that I did with a colleague. The time that we've each selected that our child in this scenario was called Emerald would spend with us. And under that handovers heading, you can see that we were able to select where we do our handovers, when and where on weekdays and weekends. And we've got a whole lot of other statements under those headings that really cover the everyday logistics of sharing care for our children now that we're separated. So in a minute, you'll see how people select those statements to be in their parenting agreement. They don't need to type anything or draft anything. It's all there for them to select. And you can see that Kat and I, that was my colleague, agreed with everything that the other one had proposed, and it went into the document. If people would like to convert their parenting agreement to a parenting plan on Amica, it's an optional step, and there's a bit of explanation about the fact that plans have more weight. So you can see there's a learn more button there, or a learn more link. So what we do is along the way, we explain things in a segmented way. So people jump off, they learn a bit more, and then they come back to where they were. And that just manages the cognitive load as people go through, so they're not overloaded with information as they're going through. So that's their parenting agreement and the parenting plan. They're really quite straightforward and quite simple and quite easy for people to understand if they're self-represented parties just amicably working out their documents together. So moving on to property agreements, you can see it's a really sort of similar looking agreement. It's got Amica's name and the date that we finalised our property arrangements, and it's divided into parts with an introduction and a background and some statements acknowledging that we've, you know, complied with all the usual requirements in family law, such as full and frank disclosure, that we understand that Amica doesn't split superannuation, but it has taken our superannuation into account and that sort of thing. And then part 4 is the money and the property that Kat and I entered onto Amica, and you'll see in a minute how we did that. And then part 5 is what we've decided to do with each piece of property. So Amica does the maths for people and fills in these documents. So they don't need to see any agreements as they're going through the interface. It's much more of a modern online interface as you'd expect these days. And you can see, of course, on the right where Kat and I agreed to everything together. So that's the property agreement. People can also choose to apply for consent orders in relation to property, not children's matters on Amica. And they go through and they answer some questions, and Amica will actually fill out the court application document for them and a fully typed minute of order. And then those third and fourth bullet points are some guidance documents about how to file the court application. So when people fill in their information, it's fed into the templates and it's generated and downloaded in this sort of form. So really formal looking. Just point out at the top, as Ruth mentioned, the Family Court of Australia is now the Federal Circuit Family Court of Australia, and we actually have the new templates in the system, but I took these screenshots before we had them in the system. So you can see here that the property that my colleague and I entered into our test has gone through into the template in the right place so that the minutes are all set out nicely to be filed in the court. And also our application document was all filled out by Amica. So our names and our details are all transferred across. There's a circle around the jurisdiction selection there just to let people know that we ask a couple of questions about jurisdiction. We don't ask it in terms of what is your jurisdiction, because that obviously doesn't mean much to people. And then the document will be filled out for them according to how they answer the questions. Here's our property that we put in to Amica. So you saw that in the agreement, the Franklin Street property, and the effect of the orders that we saw or that we're seeking, and the guidance document. So we provide some of the court's DIY kit, not all of it, because not all of it's needed if you've actually done the agreement on Amica, and a more sort of specific nuts and bolts copy that's an Amica generated document there to help people know what to do next once they've got those documents generated from Amica.
Paula, can I ask, someone's asked a question, do the parenting agreements and property agreements go to court?
No, they don't go to court. So those are agreements that parties make between themselves. And I guess we come back to that point, they are amicable and they know what they want to do, but they're looking for a pathway to actually do it and to put it in writing. So they don't go to court, but we would expect that they'd be pretty happy with them and comply with them because they've gone through the steps on Amica, which you'll see in a minute, and they have a great sense of ownership and control and amicability as they go through this process. But the consent orders, obviously, for property, they can file in court if they want to. Hope that answers the question.
Yeah, thanks.
So all those documents that we just saw are free if either party's on an income support payment. If someone's not on an income support payment, there are some modest costs which are on my next screen. And those are only incurred once people choose to download those documents. Either party can pay and it's a secure payment gateway like you'd expect. So these are the costs, nil if someone's on an income support payment, or the agreement, the typed agreement is $150 for both property and parenting. And if someone chooses to generate an application for consent orders, that's $250. So it's not per person, it's per agreement or per consent order application. So that's the total. So that's the products. Let's look at the process. So Amica can be used on a phone, a desktop or a tablet. I prefer desktop myself and I think it's a better user experience. So I've just made it a bit bigger in that picture. This is the Amica website, and to start using Amica, the tool, people jump onto this website, which is www.amica.gov.au, and create an account, which you can see is in the circle there. First, they need to find out if Amica is right for them, and I'll go through that screening process when I talk about safeguards in a minute. Once people log in, the first thing they can do is invite their partner. So it's really important that people sign up through this invitation link. That's how Amica knows to link them as a couple and link their information. So don't sign up separately because then we'll just have to get one of you to cancel that out and link this way. When you do send your invitation, there's a nice little visual. This is taken from a different test, so it's got a couple of, you'll see different names in my screenshots because I've got different ones from different sources. But that little paper plane goes off to let you know you sent your invitation. And once your former partner signs up with you, you both jump in and complete some relationship information. So the Amica asks questions and you answer them, and it uses those answers to create what we call statements, which is, you can see one here, Sam and Jamie got married in March 2013 and when they just separated, and it asked, are you divorced yet? And if you say no, then it generates the statement that your divorce is not finalised. Both of you need to approve everything that the other one enters, so you have that great sense of working together. No one can sort of jump ahead or manipulate the outcome. And two little ticks appear. That it's since been changed, so the two little ticks have a consistent colour code. Mine are always teal and the other party's always purple, I think. And you can also see here, there's a little messaging function within Amicus. So you can sort out any little things that need to be tidied up along the way within the tool. You don't need to jump out and text each other. So it just makes it quick and easy. So the user experience with parenting looks like this. There's a dashboard and some tabs. That's the sort of pattern on Amica. The essentials are a couple of statements that go into every parenting agreement, but I'll jump to the scheduler. You can see on the left, it's a really nice visual interface. So you select the number of nights you'd like the child or children to spend with you. And there's the color coding I was talking about. And then that feeds into the document on the right. So as people go through, what they're seeing is the more user-friendly interface on the left. And at the end of the whole process, they get the document on the right, which is more of a traditional legal-looking document. So you can see there it says 1 week cycle on the left. People can choose a 1 week, a 2 week, or a 3 week cycle on Amica. The screenshot on the right has a 2 week cycle because Kat and I actually changed our agreement after I took that screenshot. And it also calculates the number of handovers that you will have given the nights that you've each selected. So Amica will work that out for you, and then you have that option to select when and where you'll do your handovers. So the questions that generate those statements we saw, the statements under education and health, like you can see on the right, they look like this on the user interface. Would you like to include the following statement? This one's about extracurricular events. People just click yes or no. Mostly they click yes, but occasionally if it doesn't suit them, for example, if their accommodation's not fully established somewhere else, they might select no for some of them. And then you can see it generates a document or the statement in the document on the right. So people only see 1 or 2 of these questions at a time. So it's very, I'm speaking really quickly because we've only got 1 hour together, but people can go at their own pace. They just see a little bit of information at a time, and they can click on links to explain more along the way. And the little screenshot that's sort of overlaid in the center at the bottom shows that each time people agree on a statement, they get some positive feedback. So it says, great, you've reached an agreement on this statement. So for everything they agree, they get some positive feedback because it is a tough time for them, and everything they agree on, you know, is 1 step further to new positive amicable arrangements. So there's a lot of feedback throughout the tool for people. These are the topics that those statements cover. So school holidays, both long and short, special occasions, education, health, travel, major financial decisions, how to communicate going forward, religious and cultural practices, and how to deal with making changes in the future. So there's a statement about all of those, and people select yes or no, and it goes into the document accordingly. Like I mentioned, we have lots of information that people can select. So they click on something that says, I need more info, learn more, what does this mean, why, lots of things like that. This one was about selecting a method of communication, and you can see in the screenshot, which is ever so slightly blurry, the second sentence is, you should think about what works best for you. So we really do try and focus on a family's own personal situation, and it's not necessarily one size fits all. So looking at the property user experience, again, we have a dashboard and some tabs. You can see here the ticks show that Kat and I had completed those tabs. At the moment, we're just developing a little update where there's an orange dot if some tabs haven't been completed. And we're also updating some of the sort of notifications so that if someone has completed something, you'll get a notification and it'll take you to that spot to have a look at that. We don't expect people to know how to gather their information and to know what's necessary. So instead, we prompt people and say, do you own property? Yes, we do. And then you're taken to the questions about property. And if you don't, you click no, we don't. And then you don't have to deal with those questions. So this goes through property, vehicles, bank accounts, debts, all the things that people need to be entering for full and frank disclosure. And the little visuals there obviously just make it that little bit more user-friendly. Again, people enter their answers and that generates statements. So for this one, you can see in bold the address, the value, and the mortgage information was entered. And people can upload evidence. So they can upload bank statements, you know, mortgage statements, CTs, things like that. Once everything's entered, a table of assets and finance is generated. So you can see what's been entered. And you can see there the little Toyota Yaris is a joint asset, so the value's been attributed to both Kat and I 50-50. The next step, once everything is in, is that Amica's AI will kick in and suggest what's a fair division of our money and property. And this is the really unique feature of Amica. It takes into account the things you can see on the left, the usual things, the length of the relationship, our contributions, age, future needs, share of children, and things like that. There's just a reminder there when that happens that this information and everything that you do on Amica is confidential, and you agree to that when you sign up because it's in the terms and conditions, and it's also without prejudice. So Amica calculates everything that we've entered, gives us a suggestion. You can see there's a bar with that suggestion. If you want to change that suggestion, you hover over the bar and a little dot appears and you can slide the bar to make an alternative suggestion. So you can see down the bottom in the circle, it says you can agree or you can make your own offer. So people can go back and forth a couple of times and they can message each other about why they think a different offer is fair. And once they agree, they get something like this. Again, that little paper plane. So here it said, Kat will also be able to view our suggestion. So I said, yes, I accepted that suggestion, and it was letting me know that Kat needed to see it too. So that I'll just go back. That's really a really key feature of Amica that people ask us about, you know, how does that work? So that's how it looks and how it works. Once people agree on that, what we call the agreed percentages, the overall percentages, the next thing they can do is divide their assets. So they get a bit of information to guide them into that, and some steps they might need to carry out, like checking with banks and so on. And now they have a new dashboard, which is dividing property. So you can see at the top, it's got an overview of our money and property, and then my assets, Kat's assets, and joint assets. And some guidance there that you can see in the circle. So in order to achieve our split, it was letting us know what percentage needed to be transferred to Kat. And you can see here for each property or each asset, you can either choose to keep it yourself, transfer it to your former partner, or sell it. And when you select one of those, for here, I chose sell, it gives you a little bit of explanation. And if you think, oh, actually, I don't like that, I don't want to do that, you can deselect and go back and forth. Down the bottom in the circle, there's a dollar figure. When I took this screenshot, it's 0, but that's a rolling tally, so that if you choose to do something with an asset, it's letting you know if a cash payment needs to also be made to reach your overall agreed percentages. So it's always doing the maths for you as you go along. And you can see I've just got an extra overlay there. Add a message to explain your proposal. So there's always this communication, a lot of emphasis on communication all the way through. So consent order documents, which are only for property matters, when people they get asked on Amica, what document would you like to create? Parenting agreement, property agreement, consent order documents. Once they choose consent order documents, it goes green, so they know they're in that sort of section on Amica, and they do need to check that their situation is suitable. And when I say suitable, one big part of that is superannuation types. So people can use Amica to create consent order applications if they have one of these kinds of super, because the value is the face value. So if they have a more complicated type of super, the consent order option won't be suitable for them, but they can use the property agreement documents. So they go through and they answer questions that are taken straight from the court application form that we haven't already asked. We don't ask everything up front because not everybody wants to use this option, so we don't want to overload people up front. That's an example of the jurisdiction question that I mentioned. And then this is just some guidance, for example, telling me I've got 8 statements to complete and 5 to review. So Kat had done 5 that I needed to check and tick off, so those 2 ticks would appear. So just a little bit about the artificial intelligence. Like I mentioned, it takes into account the factors that are usually considered, which you'd all be really familiar with. It's based on a database that we built, and that was contributed to by family lawyers nationally with over 1,000 scenarios. So one thing that we're really keen to emphasise is that we want Amica to be used safely and suitably. So suitably means it's those people who are amicable and have straightforward situations. Safely means things like family violence. So people need to self-screen by clicking on this button that you saw earlier. And we go through a self-screening process where family violence comes first, timing comes next because of court-related deadlines, and then the nature of their relationship and some complexities around children and property. So when they go through, it looks like this. So the family violence screening question says you should only use Amica if you, or you shouldn't use Amica if you don't feel comfortable and safe sharing information. Or if there's an existing family violence order in place, it's not really suitable. So people, again, they don't have to type anything, they just choose yes or no. If they choose no, they'll see a screen like this, and we don't want to have any dead ends for people. So when they get to this screen, they can either click on Get Legal Help, and they'll see a screen with the legal aid numbers in each state. As Ruth said, it's they're all state-based, so every state and territory is listed. Or they can click on Info about separating, and we have a hub of information about separating and different aspects of separating on the website. If it is suitable and they do sign up, we use 2-factor authentication, which is standard in online products these days, and everyone's familiar with that. That's a security measure. We have a help and support page, and you can see on the top right the legal helpline that I just mentioned, state and territory, but we also have a lot of other sort of support links like these. So we're very conscious that people need more than legal information at this time in their life, and so we link into these sorts of services. And we also, when they get their AI suggestion that you saw with the percentages, they each receive an email automatically that just says this can be a bit of a reality buy at that moment, and if you want to access help and support, we take them to that help and support page from the link in that email. We have reminders along the way that everything is confidential. We know people really don't dwell on terms and conditions, no matter how nicely they're written. There are a lot of safeguards in Amica that people don't necessarily see. So once Amica makes a suggestion about percentages, and people can make other suggestions within a range, so that little slider that I showed you will only slide a certain distance. It won't slide way away from that original calculation. Once everything's in and that AI is triggered, that information that was that fed into the AI is locked, for want of a better word, but we can unlock it if need be. They just both need to agree to that. Otherwise, it can be a bit of a loop. There's a sentiment analysis tool, so those messages that you saw won't send if they contain offensive language. And if people's superannuation is very different from each other, a little warning pops up just to say you can go ahead with your property agreement, but we do suggest that you check in with your legal helpline and get some independent legal help just before you finalise that. This is an old screenshot, but it just shows you that bubble of the slider. If people do need to unlock that information, or if they're having any other sort of technical issues, sometimes they enter the wrong email address, they forget their password, things like that, they can jump on Ask Amicus. So that is a chat service. It's manned by, or should I say staffed by real people, not a chatbot. So they can get a real answer straight away. And if necessary, we refer them to the tech team to help them. We never change anyone's information on Amicus. So if they have a problem, what we do is unlock the information and they can go back and change anything they would like to do. And we get both of them to approve that. If people are halfway through and they think, oh, okay, this is not going to work out the way we expected, or if they just want to check a discrete issue with some advisor, legal, financial, they can export their progress, and it will, they'll get an email with all the information they've entered so far, all their financials and everything be all set out nicely in an email. They can go and get some advice, and if they are able to come back onto Amica and keep going, or if they'd rather pursue other avenues, they're able to use the information that they get in that email to help them move forward. So our approach is, if Amica can contribute and help in any way to help people move forward, then that's what we want to achieve. Currently, we have a quality assurance process, so we're able to check every AI suggestion. If it's outside of the expected range, because you can imagine it's a very new and innovative tool, occasionally some results come up outside of the expected range. We will contact both parties really quickly and let them know that they should get some independent legal advice to check what happened there and see if they still want to stay with that result or pursue something different. So that's by email. So we've had some lovely feedback. It was on the Sunrise program. Koshi said it was a genius idea, but really client feedback is the thing we like to focus on. So the guy in the centre there said it helped us have these conversations, and in fact he also said it led the conversations. It gave us a pathway, which he found really useful. And Steph said for the parenting, it just covered things we wouldn't have thought of. We wouldn't have thought to plan ahead for the extracurriculars and that sort of, or the school holidays and that sort of thing. So she was really grateful for that. So if people would like to refer clients or tell people about Amica, there's a few things, a few tools you can use to help let them know about it. We have Facebook, we have Instagram, and we have some explainer videos on YouTube. So you look up Amica Australia and you should find those little explainer videos there. They're really quick. They're sort of half a minute long or 2 minutes for the longest one. Okay, I hope I'm all good for your timing.
Perfect. We just have one question so far, Paula, which is, do you provide translated information about Amica, and does the website have the option of other languages?
Unfortunately, so far, we don't have the resources for that, but it is on our wish list. It's definitely an issue that we have discussed at our end, and we are very keen to work towards that. So, Ruth, I'm thinking that question you could talk to about that as well, how you work with people from diverse cultural backgrounds whose English isn't their first language.
Thank you, Kerry. Yes, Legal Aid New South Wales does have a lot of resources in a range of community languages. So they provide information about the family law processes for people in their own language. And of course, whenever we assist someone who needs an interpreter, we will arrange an interpreter that is paid for by Legal Aid New South Wales, either over the phone or if that person is able to access Zoom, we're able to provide people with advice that way, or if necessary, see that person in person. A lot of services now over the COVID period have transitioned to telephone services to keep everyone safe, but we are able to see people in person where their vulnerability requires that we do that in order to assist them effectively.
Okay, thanks. Well, I don't have any other questions, Paula, so do you want to send it back to me? And thank you so much for that presentation. It was really interesting.
Thank you.
We also did a interview with Paula on our Law for Community Workers podcast, Law for Community Workers on the Go, so you could also listen to that. So I haven't got, can you just make me the presenter?
Yeah, okay.
I think it comes up with something and then I get that option to show my screen, which hopefully is the right one. Thank you. All right, well, we're very close to the end of our webinar. We've got 1 minute to go. If anyone's got any questions, feel free to type those in. So here you can see the contact details for the Early Intervention Unit, 1800 551 589, and also Amica, as Paula said, amica.gov.au. Plus, if you search Amica Australia, you can find videos on YouTube. And don't forget Law Access New South Wales, 1300 888 529 for if your client has any legal problems. And we have a webinar coming up, our last one, I think, for 2021 on the 1st of December, talking about Law Access New South Wales and the range of supports that you can get through them. Okay, so that's the end of our webinar. Someone's asked, has it been recorded? Yes, the webinar has been recorded and it will go up on the Legal Aid New South Wales YouTube channel in the next few days. So you can look out for that if you go onto our YouTube channel and look for community legal education webinars. Just to remind you also, you'll get a survey after this webinar and a follow-up email with links to what we've talked about. If you're watching the recorded webinar and you have any questions, you can forward those to the Community Legal Education team and we'll pass them on, which is cle@legalaid.newsouthwales.gov.au. No other questions that I can see, and I've already spoken about Law Access New South Wales for free legal help in New South Wales, and they can help pass people on to family lawyers as well. So if you need help to find that early intervention unit number for your client, they can help with that. Okay, well, I think that's it. So thank you very much, Ruth and Paula, for your time today and sharing your knowledge about how you can help families that are separating or have other issues in their lives, and for answering the questions that we got from our audience. So I think, did you have any last minute messages, Paula?
No, just thanks to everyone for their time.
Okay, and Ruth, anything last minute?
No. Lovely to talk to you today. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, all right. Well, we'll say bye for now and we'll see you all at our next Law for Community Workers webinar. Okay, thanks. Bye.
Thanks, Kerry. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.